The wait is finally over, and we got some major news. We got our final trailer for Silksong, the newsletter explaining why the game took so long to make, GOG updated their Silksong page with new images that we never saw before, there's a new blog post on Team Cherry's website, and most importantly, our release date. And I will be breaking everything down in detail to the best of my ability in this video. So let's start with the trailer. The trailer begins with strings flying across the screen as we get a shot of Moss Grotto with Team Cherry's logo popping up. The next scene shows us Hornet walking out of Moss Grotto, and in the background we see a bunch of mossy enemies flying up into the sky, similar to how the bees did in the background around the hive. After that we see Hornet approaching a small village that I presume is in the same area but a bit further ahead. We also saw that this village was once attacked by the giant skull enemy back in one of the trailers. In this village, things don't seem to be going too well, or maybe everyone's just a bit sleepy. Except for this little guy. A small fellow fixing a house or a sign. We've actually seen him before in a blog post image where Hornet interacted with him while he was repairing something that is presumably a sign. That is also why I called him the new Manderbug in my previous videos. The next clip shows us Hornet in an area with the massive root structures in the background, jumping from a small dock into the water. Something interesting here is how the enemy seems to be sleeping and only starts to move once it spots Hornet. That makes me wonder if some areas will reward you for being sneaky. Now the next clip is really exciting. We finally get to see more of the caravan. They're in some kind of cave that we didn't really see before. Originally, they were described in the riddles as friendly band of travelers, but here they seem to have settled down. We see multiple caravans in the background, along with what could be a blacksmith's forge or maybe just a heating lamp. Either way, this guy is clearly enjoying sitting next to it. Unlike before in the videos that we got in the riddles, they aren't packed up and on the move, which makes me think that this spot feels more permanent. We also see a new bench design, which is pretty cool. And in the background we see a huge number of fleas. Presumably this is the place where they go after being rescued and likely where you claim your rewards for saving them. Next we get a gorgeous shot of the Forest of Bones. Nothing new with the enemies is seen, all the ones we've seen before, but the background is incredible. We see giant rib cages forming bridges across this area, super atmospheric. One new detail here though are these shaky platforms that look like they're about to collapse once you step on them. The following clip shows us the same area that we saw in the second trailer, with no major changes aside from the colors and visuals looking even more polished. Now, we see an area in Greymore we already saw in the first trailer, but this time Hornet walks a bit more further to the right, revealing a giant bell block that we only see a snippet of before. As she keeps moving to the right, we notice more and more bells scattered on the ground, presumably leading us to the next area. In the next clip, we see Hornet ascending from one of the lava-filled areas, and this really gives you a sense of just how vertical this world is going to be. Hornet keeps flying upward for quite a while, and when you think you reach the top, another wind current is waiting for you. But the most interesting detail in this clip is this one tiny golden ring. We already know that these golden rings are connected to one of the NPCs we've seen before, Chakra the Cartographer. So it's pretty safe to assume that she's just off screen here to the right, meaning this is probably the spot where we'll grab this area's map. The next clip brings us back to the Bellheart City, which we last saw in those Nintendo Switch 2 images. And, well, it's still just as decrepit as before, but thanks to this new footage we can pick out few new details. First, the quest board wasn't completely removed after all, it was simply moved to the left. Then, we spot some familiar NPCs from the earlier trailers and images. The shopkeeper, Sherma, and this little dancing bug. There's also a new sign above one of the buildings, though it doesn't give away too much beyond that. Now for the really interesting part, we see the Forge Daughter again, but this time we actually get a look at what she's selling, or rather crafting. The first thing is the Sting Shard, which we've seen before, but now we get its description, or perhaps Forge Daughter's thoughts on the item. A vicious stabbing trap? We can build it. Just know, it disturbs us. These devious implements you conceive to kill. Charming, right? Along with this, we can see that items now have little icons at the top showing which category they belong to, plus the required materials for crafting. For the Sting Shard, this includes a strange black stone, which I'm guessing will function like the pale ore did in Hollow Knight, and 140 rosaries. The next item is the Magma Bell, which belongs to the blue category. I'm pretty sure this is the same item that shows up as the Magma Ball in Hornet's HUD, though I can't say for certain yet. Its description reads, "This trinket is our own invention. It wards against deadly lava and heat around these docks. The workers used to request them of us, now they've lost their mind to care." So yeah, this is almost certainly a passive ability. Maybe preventing Hornet from taking fire damage, or at least lowering the damage when touching lava. It could even let us freely walk on those hot glowing coals that used to hurt Hornet before. And once again, this item confirms that the workers in the deep docks are mindless and they don't even feel pain anymore. As for the requirements for this item, the same black stone material is needed plus 110 rosaries, which is a little cheaper than the sting shards. The last major item we catch, though only for a few frames, is a crafting kit. This item doesn't require any materials, just 180 rosaries, and it doesn't seem to belong to any of the known categories. So I'm guessing it's more like a utility item, probably used outside of combat. Its description says, "Crafting by claw alone produces inferior results. With this kit you can craft finer, sharper and deadlier tools, if that is what you wish." That makes me think that Hornet can craft tools on her own, but they won't be as good as the ones made by the Forge Daughter. I also suspect that this kit will be needed to repair your tools at benches. And finally, we get a really quick glimpse at another tool, some kind of spikes wrapped in leather, costing just 50 rosaries. Probably a consumable throwing weapon, basically Silksong's version of budget ninja stars. Now, this next clip could honestly be an entire short video on its own, but I'll just cover it here for now. We finally get to see the map in Silksong. That's right, Hornet actually opens the map, and judging by the spot where she's sitting, I'd say she's located right here, between the far fields and deep docks. So let's start analyzing this map from right to left, beginning with far fields. In this area we see a town called the Pilgrim's Rest, and right away there's this strange marker here, something we don't really see in any of the other towns. And at the bottom of far fields we also see something marked on the map that looks like a giant corpse of a bug. Moving into deep docks, we once again see this weird yellow ball symbol, which shows up in 3 places on the whole map, at least the map that we see. Other than that, there aren't many significant landmarks here except this thing, but we'll circle back to this later. About the deep docks, there is an area called the Huntress March, and I'd bet that's where we'll find the NPC Huntress. Now, this area is really interesting. First, there's this strange symbol that looks either like a doorway or maybe an arena, not really sure what for though. Then, just about that, we see something that looks like a weird statue, not really humanoid, and judging by the bench placement, I'm guessing there will be a tough enemy here or something else of big meaning. And, above this bench, we also see a white mark, presumably placed by the player, and I think that's where the Huntress is located. Honestly, I'm convinced that these silver marks that we see all around the map are the player's marks in general, because some of them are literally sitting in between areas not marking anything specific. Moving left, we reach the Marrow. Here we see a similar structure to the one that we saw in the Huntress March, except this one doesn't have the doorway looking symbol in the middle. What we do see though is what I presume is one of the big bells we have to ring, like the one shown after the Lace boss fight. Here we also see something strange. On the map we can see what looks like 2 bench markers overlapping each other. Now in Hollow Knight we never saw 2 benches right next to each other, so I find this pretty weird. It could represent something else entirely, but the colors do match each other and they both look like bench markers. We also see that the Marrow connects to the Bellheart area, which looks like one of the smaller zones in the game. But I think that the most of the Bellheart is actually a town. Kinda like how Ori and the Will of the Wisp had a giant hub area where all the important NPCs were located. From this town, let's rewind a bit to the biggest area of the game, Greymoor. Here we see a small sub-area that is briefly visible at the start of the clip only for 4 frames, called the Crow Lake. It's got this huge structure in the middle, which is probably the main attraction of this area, kinda like the Teacher's Archives in the Fog Canyon. To the left of it, we see yet another one of those strange ball symbols, which I do think are bells, but again, I'm not 100% sure yet. Further left, we come across a sub-area called the Halfway Home. Probably some kind of safe spot inside Greymoor. The whole Greymoor area itself looks very different from others, with these giant archways scattered across it, making me think that in-game it will look something like the City of Tears. Then we move on to Shellwood. Yes, the same name as the material from which Zod's nail is made. That could mean that this area is filled with that material, which is pretty exciting lore-wise, meaning that Zod is probably from Farloom. It's also a fairly large area with some minor marks spread throughout the map. But the most interesting things here, once again one of those bell symbols is present, and a massive structure sitting in the middle of the area, and I'll get back to that in a moment. Now finally, at last, we see the Moss Grotto. We don't get to see the full name on screen, but come on, what else can end with Grotto? Here we see a couple of things, like the giant vertical area that we'll probably traverse by using the wind currents. Now we finally know how these areas will look like on the map, and once again we see a bunch of markings on the map, but for the first time we can actually say what some of them are. This mark is most likely the elevator we emerged from, since it matches the area that we saw in the Moss Grotto. You see, this gap would basically be where Hornet fell from. Then there's this strange mark that I personally think is one of the Weaver doors, and the bench that we see on the map could be the one before the Moss Mother fight. We also see a sub-area called the Bone Bottom here, with the third and final one of those yellow ball markings. There's also this strange elevator looking thing that I think is the same elevator that we saw long ago in some footage that I can't really remember the name of right now, but it will be on screen. And finally, another one of those massive structures. Now, there are 3 of them, or well, more like 2.5. We can see one of those structures fully in the Shellwood area, most of one in the Moss Grotto, and only a half of one in the Deep Docks. I couldn't tell you what these are for sure, but I do think that they are some kind of transport system, not for the player, but for the materials that are being sent to the Citadel through the pipes. Or I could be just completely wrong and they are something else entirely. From this, we can really see just how big the map of Silksong is going to be, especially since we don't even see the Citadel on it. And with that, we are finally done with the map. Now moving back to the trailer, I almost forgot what I was doing. Here we can see the spitting enemy from the very first trailer, still spitting, still attacking, good for him. Then we get the exact same footage that we got in the Xbox Ally reveal trailer, but the next clip is very cool. It shows us the area where we first saw Hornet sliding down, but this time she's climbing up. And the way she's doing it is really interesting. She's basically using her needle like a grappling hook to latch onto platforms and even enemies. We also get something completely new here. There's this frostbitten vignette around the screen, Hornet's masks are tinted in a bluish color, and those little ice crystals are flying around the masks. That tells us that this area is incredibly cold. In the background we also see some kind of wires, which makes me think that these platforms Hornet is hopping across from are actually cable cars, kinda like the ones you'd take up and down the mountain. The next clip shows us Hornet in an area where the ants live, with what I presume is the magma bell shown in her HUD. After that we see the room with rising lava, the same one we saw back in the second trailer. Looking at them side by side, not much has changed except that now the enemy's eyes glow before they attack and the colors are now way more polished. Next we see a grand hunt quest with NPCs Garman and Zaza, characters we already seen a few times before, and nothing major seems to have changed here. Then there's a clip of The Last Judge, and it's basically the same deal. No major changes that I can spot, except the graphics and colors look way more polished now. But the next thing we see is simply mesmerizing. A cutscene of a giant door opening. I think that this is the cutscene that plays right before you enter the Citadel. Hornet is also standing on the floor with typical Citadel design, and I really believe that this happens immediately after the Last Judge fight. Once you defeat him, you're granted access through the door that he's protecting, and that door leads us to the next clip, which shows us the Citadel itself. I personally think that these 3 clips were placed one after the other on purpose, because that's exactly how the events will play out canonically in the game. The next clip is the same one we saw a few days ago at the Gamescom livestream. After that, we see Hornet fighting enemies in a new room in the Citadel, but then things get more interesting. We get a clip of Hornet traveling extremely fast upwards through the water area. We already saw an image of this back when Nintendo Switch 2 was announced, but now we finally see it in motion. Here we can also notice some new details in Hornet's HUD. There's a new item that looks like some kind of lifeblood syringe tool, or maybe it's just a different version of the magma stone we saw earlier, but honestly, we don't really know what it does from this clip alone. There's also a new white mark that we never seen before, and it kinda looks like a shield, but again, we don't really know what it does. In the next clip, Hornet is fighting this large enemy with chains on his hands, and there are also chains hanging from the ceiling. This makes me think that this could possibly be some kind of prison, possibly even the one where Grindel is being kept. We also see Hornet pulling out what looks like a nail drill move straight out of Gurren Lagann, and in the middle of the screen we finally get a confirmation that Silksong will feature over 200 enemies, which is much more than Hollow Knight had. Some of these enemies look incredible. The ones in the next clip, for example, seem to be like this game's version of the Mantis tribe, with really fast and precise attacks and dashing all over the place. The area in which this takes place has already been seen before in the Edge magazine, but we still don't know the name of it. But the most interesting thing to me is once again in Hornet's HUD. We see the same new symbol, but also something that looks like a gun or maybe a handheld cannon. So does this canonically confirm that Hornet can use guns? Stay tuned for the next episode of Guns in Farloom, where we will cover the AK-47. The next clip shows us a room that we already seen, but this time the HUD is different. We finally see a new crest. This metallic twisted looking crest that is so far definitely my favorite design out of them all. And while this crest is equipped, Hornet can perform an attack where she slices through her opponent at such speed that she literally disappears and can't be hit. It's a move straight out of an anime. Then we cut to another clip from the Gamescom showing the new robotic bosses, and here we see that Silksong will have 40 bosses in total, which is fewer than Hollow Knight, but honestly, from what we've seen so far, the quality of bosses has grown exponentially. In the next clip, we see another one of those high-quality bosses, with this creepy skeletal black creature covered in a hood with 6 holes, presumably for his 6 eyes. And just before he dashes away from Hornet, 2 metallic objects extend from his back, and I have no clue what those 2 objects could be. Then he burrows underground and spawns these massive string pillars across the arena while causing the ground to erupt. And the only way to seemingly dodge this attack is by hovering over it. In the background we also see one of those giant bells that is covered in silk, just as the bell that we saw after the lace fight, but this time we know the culprit behind why it's covered in silk, and it's this dude. Next up is a boss of the poisonous swamp area, which turns out to be a giant flying frog, and it attacks Hornet by trying to suck her up and eat her. Its mouth also reminds me a lot of the great Putu bird or the ghost bird. In this clip, we also see a new item in Hornet's inventory, which looks like a recolored or maybe an upgraded version of the previously seen item. It's this weird lava stone looking item, which we first saw during the Gamescom live showcase a few days ago. And then we finally get a new clip of Trabio. Now, with updated effects and better colors, my boy is looking even more majestic than ever. His arena though is looking a little more bland now, with no red confetti flying everywhere and the giant red chandeliers being removed. But we can also see the new crest again in this clip, so that's pretty hype. Next we see the red drill bosses, and here we can see that nothing major has changed aside from the colors compared to the older footage. After that we get a look at the boss that was first shown in the second trailer. I don't know if it's new mechanics or this is some kind of second stage of the boss, but now the arena is filled with these thorny pillars restricting your movement. On top of that, there's also a new tree-like enemy flying around trying to kill you with what I can only describe as a spinning Beyblade attack. We then see the robot boss that has appeared many times before and nothing seems to have changed there, but the next clip shows us the city that we first saw in the first trailer. While the characters and buildings haven't changed much, the background looks noticeably different. A few elements are missing and the whole place feels drained of color, appearing more white or grey. This makes me think that the city might actually be located in the Marrow, since the Marrow has a similar color palette to this one. After that, Hornet is shown riding one of the Bell Beasts, followed up by another cutscene where she's fighting a cloaked bug wielding a gilded pin. From this, it seems clear that Silksong will feature much more cutscenes than Hollow Knight did. After that, we probably get what is the funniest part of the trailer. A small bug, who perfectly represents the average member of the Silksong subreddit, tries to kiss Hornet. only to get a fist to the face. Or maybe a slap, but I would prefer a fist. But in all seriousness now, this bug seems to be holding a paintbrush while standing next to one of the signs, which makes me think that he might be responsible for writing all the text on signs in Farloom. Finally, the trailer ends just like every other with an already seen lace fight set in an arena of white flowers. And I didn't notice any significant changes here. And that's it for the trailer analysis. I honestly can't wait to see all the things I missed once Mosbeck eventually makes his analysis. Now let's move on to the next big update, the newsletter. I don't think that anyone wants me to read this whole thing word for word, so here's a shorter version. Basically, it explains that Silksong has taken over 7 years to develop, not because of any problems or theme issues, but because Team Cherry has committed to making the game exactly the way they envisioned it. They considered releasing it multiple times before, but they just kept adding new content which has stretched the development even further. They also chose not to give frequent updates in order to avoid spoiling too much of the game. On the more personal note, William Pellen now has 2 kids with a 3rd one on the way, so it's nice to see that Team Cherry is growing in more ways than one. And Jack Vine was spotted in the background tweaking. And the most important takeaway from all of this is that Team Cherry still has future plans for Silksong. That means we can potentially see a DLC, and they even hinted that their plans are ambitious and will possibly be finalized in the year 2032. So yes, Daily Silksong News channel is still in business. GOG also updated their Silksong page and added some brand new images that were never seen before. One of the coolest ones shows Hornet fighting these crab enemies in the Coral Forest area. And I gotta say, these crabs are easily some of the coolest looking enemies I have seen so far. Then we got a couple of images that we technically saw before, like the Edge magazine screenshot, but there is some small updates. For example, Hornet now has the new crest equipped. But most important image out of the bunch is definitely the one of Hornet gliding down a giant electric tunnel. It probably connects to the Coral Forest area since the surroundings really look like corals and give off an aquatic vibe, at least to me. This could also be the place where she unlocks the purple electric dash ability, the one we spotted in Hornet's ability spreadsheet a while back. What's even stranger though about this image is that in this image Hornet is shown equipped with 3 red tools. This is the first time that we've seen this, at least as far as I know, and honestly I have no idea how she'll be able to use all 3 of them at once. Definitely something to keep an eye on. Moving on, Team Cherry also updated their official blog post and gave us the confirmation on where the game will be available. And now, the thing that I have been avoiding for the entire video, even though everyone already knows it, Silksong's release date has finally been revealed, and the game will officially launch on September 4th, just 2 weeks from the time when I'm making this video. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, I thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like and subscribing, it honestly means more than you know. If you spotted any errors that I made, or you have theories or thoughts of your own, let me know in the comments below. And that's it for now, I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, goodbye.